Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, August 27th. I'm Elena Barbera. This is the Based Mother Show. Got a few things to talk about today. The jig is up. Why did Mark Zuckerberg admit to election interference? It's a very curious conversation going on right now. Also want to talk about what's going on in schools with social emotional learning. You thought victimhood was just maybe coincidental or only parents' fault. It is not. It's deliberate. What else do we have today? RFK, talking about the poisoning of our food and what it's doing to us, not only physically, but economically. We're going to get right to it in just a sec.
Have you heard of the based mother?
Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Meta, founder of Facebook. They now own Threads and Instagram and who knows what else. For years, there were people who were saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story was real. For years, they were saying that, there was COVID censorship. For years, we were saying that Meta was interfering in the 2020 election and suppressing stories that would have hurt Biden and helped Trump. Well, look at that. We already knew what was going on. Back in April, we found out that the whole Russian disinformation story around the Hunter Biden laptop was a big fat lie. But now we're finding out from the horse's mouth himself. Zuckerberg has confessed to colluding with the Biden administration to suppress information during COVID. So he's not calling it collusion, of course. He's not calling it election interference. Why would he do that? So the Biden-Harris administration, according to Zuck, pressured him, and he gave into the pressure because he's a beta cuck. That's what he's admitting to. He's not acknowledging that he wanted to do it. We don't know why he's confessing now. Let's hear what he has to say in his letter. I'm just going to read you some excerpts. I'm not going to read the whole thing. In 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. I don't even believe that he didn't agree, but okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down, and we own our decisions. I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. I also think we made some choice that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. We're ready to push back if something like this happens again. I noticed that he didn't say anything about the Trump administration trying to control what was being said on Facebook. You see the difference there? Biden and Harris wanted to control the American people. You couldn't even ask a question about COVID. You couldn't even say things like, but wait a minute, only 1% of people are dying. And we have to, and those people, most of them have serious comorbidities, have serious health problems already that make them more likely to be susceptible. We could say, and that 1% almost doesn't apply to children at all. We couldn't even ask those questions about data without being suppressed or banned, reported, fact-checked. That was from the Biden-Harris administration. They have zero respect for the Constitution, zero respect for free speech. They want to completely rework how this country operates, and they want to become communist dictators. That is the truth. And then, they can say Trump says, I want to be a dictator on day one. They do nothing but gaslight, and everything that they say he's going to do, they're actually doing, taking away our rights. People died because of this. There is no question about it, that we weren't allowed to ask questions. We weren't allowed to talk about alternative treatments, and people died alone because of it. While they were forcing jabs on people, and people are now living with vaccine injuries, and we haven't even seen the full extent of the reproductive problems that people are going to have. We're seeing young athletes drop dead of myocarditis out of nowhere. We never saw that before. Hi, Noodle Vision. Thanks for coming. Then it goes on in the letter. In a separate situation. So wait, so is he going to be prosecuted? Is this criminal? I don't know. Are there other people in there? I don't know. We're going to find out in the coming days. I'm going to leave that to the lawyers. But if it is, I hope it's prosecuted to the full extent of the law, because of all the things I just said, all of the people that died, all of the people still living with repercussions, people who lost their jobs because they were skeptical about the jab. I was turned down work. My industry, I was working in live entertainment, was the first one to close down during COVID. They just shut us all down. We had no way to make a living. So when things started to open up after the vaccine came out again, the person that I had been working for called me, and, we got on the phone, we're talking, and, I'm saying, I need work. Like, I got to get back to work. And she said, well, I can start sending you out, to events around the country, but you need to be vaccinated. And I said, she said, are you vaccinated? I said, no. She said, are you going to get vaccinated? I said, no. She goes, well, then I can't send you. And I'm sorry, I can't give you this. I can't give you this job. So I got shut down when I needed the work because I wouldn't take the vax. I'm just one of millions of stories. Some people lost their pensions, their careers. People were kicked out of the military. I mean, had it far worse than I did. There were people who had it far worse than I did. So you know what? Yeah, thanks, Zuck. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Okay, here we go. In a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election. That fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations involving then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family, we sent that story to fact checkers, fact checkers, for review, and temporarily demoted it while we were waiting for a reply. It's since been made clear that the reporting was not Russian disinformation, and in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story. So he just decided to become, first of all, why is the FBI controlling what stories are getting out there? It was never Russian disinformation. And we know now that the FBI knew that it wasn't Russian disinformation even at that time. So that's a whole ball of wax, right? So there were 51 people in the government who signed the letter stating that it was Russian disinformation, that it had all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. They kept saying that over and over, Russia, Russia, Russia. Yeah, and then earlier this year, during Hunter's gun trial, that Russian disinformation laptop, which had all the evidence on it about Hunter's, payments to his dad and all the relationships that supposedly Joe was never involved in, that was presented as evidence in his gun trial. Yeah, so it is real. We know it's real. It's the whole Russian disinformation thing has been debunked. Why did it take Zuck so long to come out and say the truth? Where's the investigation of the 51 people who signed the letter when they knew all along that it was a lie? They are all guilty of election interference. Zuck thinks he's smarter than you, and he thought he was. What's going on behind the scenes that made him? Did he just wake up and find Jesus and decide to be an honest person? I sure hope that's the case, but something tells me that's not the case, just based on what we know about how this man is operated. What else is he hiding? What else has he suppressed? What else has he done? Every conservative podcaster I know says that they have been throttled by Facebook. And it's funny, there are certain things that I'm allowed to say on Instagram that surprise me because it is also a meta company like Facebook. And I've been wondering, why are they letting me get away with this? Why aren't they coming after me? If I put this on Facebook, I'd get throttled. And I wonder if at some point he's like, let things go on Instagram, guys. Just leave Instagram alone. Like, we want to pretend so that he has the leg to stand on and he can say, oh, you see, look over here. Let everything go over here. Obviously, I'm one of the good guys. Maybe. That's just a theory. But the jig is up, Zuck. You got a lot of questions to answer now. I'd like to see him pay for this, to be perfectly honest. All right, I had enough of his face. Let's move on. Over the past few years, we've seen this victimhood mentality in America. Everybody's a victim, poor me, and everybody has trauma. Every time you see a lefty talk about something go wrong in their day, they call it trauma. It's really pathetic. They've done it with everything. With the Me Too movement is one example that comes to mind, that, a girl who says that she was asked out by a guy she doesn't want to go out with, that's traumatizing. That's sexual harassment. No, that's just life. Like, sometimes people offer you things and you just say, no, thank you. Every single thing, somebody's hand bumped up against my ass on the subway. It was traumatizing. It was triggering. Oh, poor me. I have to go home and cry and snuggle my cat. And we, as a culture, I can say, and at least in my circles, we've largely blamed parents for this, for coddling their kids. And there are a lot of parents who do this, who make every single thing their child feels the most important thing in the room at all times, who make every time their child might have to face any sort of discomfort or pain or hardship, the parent gets in the way, like a helicopter parent, as they say, and make sure to shield the child. So the child never really learns how to develop a thick skin. Definitely a big part of the problem. But there's another part of the problem that we're not talking about enough, and that is called social emotional learning, which is being mandated in schools and has been for years, where children are being taught to focus on their own tough times and their own trauma. Where, let me just show you. This is Abigail Schreier. Excuse me, Abigail, for butchering your name. She's a journalist she wrote the best-selling book Irreversible Damage, about what is happening in the trans world with social contagion to our girls and how they're being sterilized and mutilated, and there's no coming back from it. And now she's talking about social emotional learning in this PragerU interview. Take a look.
Things I learned by talking to these researchers in the field of psychology was that it sounds innocuous. Ask a bunch of kids, how are they feeling? Yeah. Well, what could be wrong with that, right? They could say, I'm feeling great. The problem is their mandate is teaching social emotional learning, teaching emotional regulation. Well, if you say, great, I feel great, there's nothing to teach. So it always heads in the direction, now think of a time when you were in pain. Now think of a time when you felt bullied, when you felt left out. And then there's a second part. So that in itself increases dysregulation. By the way, it makes it harder for kids to achieve any tasks. We know this. Focusing on yourself makes it harder to achieve any hard task at all.
Yeah, think about that. When you're focused on your problems and your sadness and your stress, you can't get through the workday. But if you learn how to, as we always have done, suck it up and carry on, you can get through the day. You can still be productive. You can still help. You can still earn a living. You can still serve your family. You can still get your job done at work. What they're doing to these children is creating a problem, pointing them to what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. The next part of that is they then talk, she goes on in this interview to talk about how she says what they do is say, well, who was that? Where were your parents? Like they'll dig on a kid until they find something that went wrong. Bobby, who lives across the street, called me, freckle-faced, four eyes, whatever it is. Where was your mother when this happened? Oh, that's too bad. Your mother wasn't there to protect you. So they start now creating this resentment between kids and their parents, which is obvious. We can see that happening. Then the next thing they do, now that they have kids focused on sadness, focused on trauma, focused on fucking misery, the party of joy, is they swoop in with a solution, and they bring in a child psychologist at the school who is also a government indoctrinator. This is what the Nazis did. Remember when they had all the Hitler Youth for Hitler groups, and they took people's children and they told them, we're going to make them better, and they turned them into, little government robots who would do anything without asking and ultimately did. The government does not need to be running your child's psyche. Let's remember that our children can barely read and write anymore. We are at the bottom of the barrel as far as education on this planet. We used to be the head on, we were just on top of the totem pole. And now we're creating this sick, weak culture. And these children, if they continue on this path of becoming victims and there's a problem, all they can see are problems. They can't see opportunity. They can't see hope. They can't see solutions. They're easier to control. They're not going to be able to produce anything for themselves, which is the goal. Like she said, you can't focus, you can't produce, you can't create anything. That's the goal. Then you're helpless. You still need a roof and you still need food. So who do you turn to? You turn to a savior. The savior in this case, what they want to be the savior is the government. Now, if you're a Christian, you do know, you do believe and understand, we are taught that all human beings need a savior because we're basically by nature kind of a bunch of jerks, and we tend to slip into sin really easily and slip into darkness. We need a savior. If you're a Christian, Jesus is that savior. But if you are not, and you have no actual savior to bring you to a place of joy and hope and faith, you have the government. That's who they want to be the savior. They want to come in as, and, you know, be Jesus for you and provide for you, when what they provide is nothing but misery and unproductivity and poverty. Look at what they've done. Look at the welfare system. Who do you know in the welfare system? It is with rare exception that someone was raised on welfare and they are rising out of it and going on to build a wonderful, abundant life for their families. Welfare is a trap. The government is a trap. And that's what they're doing by indoctrinating our children into misery. They're just luring them into the trap. Makes it very, very easy. It's really sad, really sad. And so I think we need to go back to looking at our children, hitting them upside the head and saying, suck it up. Life's hard. You're going to get over it. What's for dinner? That's it. That's it. That's how we were raised. And, you know, not that that was perfect, because stuffing feelings down, sure, it can create problems. But there are healthy ways to deal with trauma. You know what? You're stressed out, go to the gym, you know, go to church, talk to God, talk to a friend about it. But to just sit and focus on it the way they have these children doing, just so that they can ultimately control them, is absolutely disgraceful. And I can't say it enough. Get your kids out of these schools. It's not just that they're not teaching them math. They're not teaching them English. They're not teaching them science. They're teaching them twisted history. And math, English, and science all have, you know, DEI and social justice woven in. Nothing's normal anymore. They're not teaching them anything of any value. And there's more to it. Get your kids out of there, because what else is happening is what we're hearing from RFK and what we heard from him in this speech. So, you know, last Friday, he decided to come out, gave that amazing 45-minute speech in which he said, you know, he's no longer running for president. He's going to endorse Donald Trump. And one of the main reasons he's doing it is because he wants to be able to take control back, or give Americans control back of their health, and start to, within 2 years, get people eating real food again and eliminating all processed foods, eliminating all addictive additives, which how in the hell those things ever got through the FDA is beyond me. But we can see that we have chronic health problems in this country like we've never had before. Here's a word from him.
In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3% compared to 50% here. Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president, I was a boy, juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the mitochondrial disorder that caused diabetes also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year.
So right before that in the speech, he said that, the food that we're eating causing all these chronic diseases is processed foods, and 70% of school provided meals are processed foods. I've been saying this for years. Even when my son was little and he would go, and I would always send him to school with lunch. And I would tell him that stuff they're serving is trash. I would never serve that to you at home. It's garbage food. And I think once in a while when they had pizza day, he would cheat and he would, throw my lunch in the trash and eat the pizza. But for the most part, he agreed. And now as he's grown up, like, he can see the difference, and he doesn't really eat very much junk food once in a while as a treat. But for many people, the junk food is just a way of life. And the fact that they're poisoning our children in the schools, they're poisoning their minds, as we just talked about, with social emotional learning, with CRT, with DEI, with activism. And now they're also poisoning their bodies with foods. So all this to set up a quick story I want to tell you. So last week I'm talking to a teacher in New York City, and she's telling me that every diabetic child in the New York City public school system, which has 1.1 million children, has their own paraprofessional in the classroom with them all day long. So I don't know how many diabetic children that amounts to in New York, because maybe some don't need a para, or because their parents have to. I looked it up. The parents have to apply for the para. So I said, and in my ignorance, I said that's ridiculous. That seems absurd. This is why we don't. This is why we're spending so much money and getting poor results. And she said, actually, as a teacher, it's not absurd. And she explained to me that these kids, some of them have very serious illnesses and they need constant monitoring throughout the day. And sometimes it's only a matter of minutes where they will need a treatment. And, for a teacher to be alone in the classroom, monitoring that child's health, and also dealing with, trying to just teach. And, sometimes they have 20, 30 kids in a room. She said having the para there is extremely helpful. And I said, all right, thanks for educating me. Sorry, I didn't mean to, it's good to know, to learn something. But a para in New York makes an average of about $40,000 a year. So in some cases, as my friend told me, there are 2 or 3 diabetic kids in a classroom. So now you're looking at a para per kid. How much of an economic drain is this putting on our school systems? So that's when you hear Democrats saying, we need more money for schools. We need more money for schools. We need more money. None of it's going to education. It's going to school psychologists who want to psych out your kids and make them think they're born in the wrong body, who want to make them think that they're victims. It's going to paraprofessionals who are dealing with the effects, the disease effects of the poisoning that the schools are participating in. So, now he says this is, bigger than our military budget every year, what we're spending, the government alone is spending on chronic diseases, never mind what the American people are investing in their own chronic diseases. Like, we have massive, massive problems. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's like really twisted. And again, the minds, they're poisoning the minds and then solving the problem with a school psychologist. They're poisoning the bodies and then sort of solving the problem with an expensive para to follow a kid around and make sure it doesn't go into some kind of sugar shock. We're really in a bad place. And I hope that RFK and Trump, Vance, can really push this forward for real and save our country. Because in other nations, this is not allowed. All these addictive food chemicals, all of these processed foods. We can't have it. Like, they don't even allow them in their nation. And think about what's happening with the economy, where groceries have gotten so expensive. If you open up the Sunday paper and you look for coupons, there's no coupons on, or I've never seen any coupons on, like, organic bananas. No, all the coupons are on Kraft mac and cheese and things like that, Doritos, processed garbage, fake food. So people who can't afford can't afford their grocery bill to begin with, they're going to probably be eating more and more and more more and more and more trash food. I forget sometimes that I'm not at my kitchen table. What are you going to do? Anyway, I hope that before I go, there's something I'd like to say on behalf of RFK Jr. and Donald Trump and JD Vance and now Tulsi Gabbard, who has joined the ranks and as a Democrat who's going to be stumping for Trump. I worry about their safety. I truly do. And I think that we should all worry because there's a lot of evil in this world. And we've already, before the July 13th assassination attempt on Donald Trump, we were all worried that they were going to try. And then that worry came to fruition. And only by the grace of God is that man still walking. We feel, I can tell there's a lot of people like me who feel that, a real surge of hope and optimism with RFK joining Team Trump and bringing some of his, more traditional Democrats with them, because anyone else who's still a quote unquote Democrat isn't a Democrat. Like, if you're not a Kennedy Democrat, you are a communist. That's all that's left. So they're calling themselves Democrats. They're chameleons when really it's communism. So I hope that he has brought some clear-headed, clear-thinking Democrats over with him to the Trump side. But the more they do, the closer they get, the more victories like this one positive outcome that we've had, the more the demons are going to rile up, and they're going to try harder and harder to eliminate these voices. And so there is yes, Robert, the evil will not walk softly into the night. That's quite poetic. I don't know if you wrote that or if it comes from somewhere else, but it is true. The more light you shine on a demon, the angrier it gets. But I'm going to read to you just a couple of lines from the book of Psalms. This was some words written by King David that can be used. There's a kind of a way of thinking of praying the scriptures using what's in the Bible as prayer in our lives. And this is the prayer that I have for these people who are trying to bring America back. See how many enemies I have. See how much they hate me. Protect and save me. Keep me from defeat. I come to you for safety. May my goodness and honesty preserve me, because I trust in you. May they be preserved. And to all the haters who say, oh, how can a Christian go for, a felon, which, let's not even get into that. Or how can a Christian go for a man like RFK who supposedly, cheated on his wife 30 some odd times? And so I like all the stuff, they just go on. How can, if you understand Christianity at all, you understand that we know that human beings are fallen. We have a fallen condition. We are sinners. We are all dark, and we all need saving, and we all need grace. And that doesn't come from us. We can offer each other grace, of course, but in the end, like, true saving doesn't come from us. It comes from God. So we're not looking for a savior. We already have a savior. What we're looking for is a politician who's going to come the closest to pushing forward morality and ideals of freedom, the same freedom that God gave us. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that Bible verse. Thank you all for coming today. I'm going to check out, and I don't know what I was going to say, but thanks again, guys. God bless you. God bless America. Oh, wait, I knew what I was going to say. Patriots Prayer Network. Make sure that you are liking, subscribing. There are actually some really cool new shows on the Patriots Prayer Network. Ann Fundner just joined. Ann Fundner, the American Mom podcast, I think her show is going to be called. I think it just started last night on the Patriots Prayer Network. You can find that on Rumble, on the Patriots Prayer Network Rumble channel. Ann was the woman who spoke at the RNC whose child, 15-year-old son, died of a fentanyl poisoning. That he took a pill that, with his friends, and to the best of our knowledge, it was the first time he ever did that, gave into peer pressure. And the pill that he took happened to be poisoned, and he died. So she is now a fierce advocate for closing the border and getting the fentanyl out of our streets in America. We've got Michaela Montgomery also with her new show. You're going to see her speaking at Trump rallies around the country. We've got, of course, the native patriot, Eddie Smith, Seth, the conservative corner, Two Guys, One Coup, Damon Galdo. We've got some really great shows on this network. And I'm going to ask you to please go there, make sure you subscribe and start watching these shows. You're going to hear some really Americans, regular Americans like me. Like there's people coming out of the woodwork and saying enough is enough. And we're trying to wake people up and it's working. We're doing it. So like, sub. And once again, God bless you. God bless America. Bye, guys.
Have you heard of the based mother?